Alright, so in this video we are going to study about inheritance in TypeScript. So the topics that we'll be covering is what is inheritance. I'll briefly talk about interfaces. I'll put this in the last. I'll talk about abstract object, which are very similar to inheritance. And then we have got super. Super is something that we used to call a parent class. This private and protected, let's see if we will require protected. We'll try to make some changes and try to use protected as well, but private definitely we'll be using. Well, I'll show you what is the difference between function and method and how it is differently implemented. There are getters and setters in JavaScript, in TypeScript. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about and then yeah, like we discussed lastly, we'll talk about briefly talk about interface and abstract object as well. Okay, so let's start. uh, so to start with, we'll take an example of user. We are going to take a user, make a user class and extend it and use this user class to as a parent class to another class, which will be a patient class. Patient class will inherit from user class, right? So user is the parent, patient is the child. Then we have so what will a user consist? Will consist of first name, last name. So both are private. Most of the variables are going to be private always in OOP because you do not want people to users to change the values on the go. You want specific functions, you want to write specific functions, methods that will have the capability to make changes by checking, keeping all the checks in place, by making sure if they are authorized or whatever business logic that you have, right? You do not want them to directly change the name without any checks on them, and that is why you are going to keep it private. So private variables cannot be changed, values cannot be changed. And the constructor. So here comes the constructor. You can write a class without a constructor if you do not have to set anything. But in this particular case, I have to set the first name and the last name. That's why I've written the constructor here. Constructor takes in the first name and the last name in the format of string and sets it to this dot first name and this dot last name. This refers to the class, right? The object. This refers to the object. Okay. So first name is being set to this dot first name and last name is being set to this dot last name, right? Then we have a getter function. So this is what I was talking about. This is a getter function. Get, a normal function is something that you a normal method, right, is something that you just write without this get, right? You just write the name of the method and with brackets and carry on, right? But with get, you can when you set it as get, right? uh, the difference it makes it is in the way it is being called, right? When you call it a regular method, you will have to call with parenthesis, right? Which is the round brackets. But if you make it a getter class, a getter method, it will, you can call it without get, without this parenthesis. So all you'll have to do is say if the object name is user, so it will be user dot get first name and not user dot get first name parenthesis, right? So that is what is a getter. So I've written two getters for get first name and get last name, right? I cannot set it as first name because first name the variables already has been used. So I've named it get first name and this one as get last name. Okay, so these functions are things that help me to get these value of these variables, right? I could have much more logic before returning this, right, if I have any. Let's go to the next one. This is a setter function. Similar to getter function, this is a setter function. It takes in a value, it sets it. The difference it is this will not return anything. So you do not even have to give the indication here of, just like you are giving an indication here, right? That this function will return a string value. This method will return a string value. Similarly, this method will not return anything, and you need not set it to anything like void or anything, because by default it is set for setter method. By default it is set to void. Similarly, I've written another setter method. This allows you to set the last name. This allows you to set the first name. You could have much more logic before setting it up, right? And that is why we have the setter method, right? So that we can do our whatever checks we want to do. If it is allowed to make this change, if there's something needs to be added, some things need to be changed somewhere else before changing this, all that logic can be put in here, and at the end you can set it to this value, whatever value the user is sharing, right? Now I begin with my patient class, and this one extends user, right? We spoke about talking a little bit of inheritance, right? This is a little bit about interfaces as well, right? This is inheritance, so it uses the keyword extends. Inheritance basically extends one class. It's like, yeah, there is a parent, okay, just like mother and father. It exists, the class exists with all its definitions and a proper class. It's a proper class that exists, and you extend its capability. You inherit everything that it has got, and then if you want, you can add things to it, right? Generally, when you want to inherit everything that is, it has already got all the methods, all the variables, and you want to add new variables, you want to keep those as well as add new variables and methods, you use inheritance, right? So patient wants to keep all this first name, last name. Also, it want to keep a little data about diseases, right? What disease they are they're experiencing or they're going through, right? So private disease string, this is a variable. It is its personal variable. This is the only variable it will have. Doesn't mean it has the only variable it has access to. It also has access to its parent variables, which are these first name and last name. In this case, it doesn't have direct access because it's a private method, private variable. Private, when you specify it to be private, only objects of this particular class can have access to it, not even the child. So patient won't have, patient object of patient won't have access, direct access to this. It will have to call these functions and get that, okay. Similarly, you can use protected if you want to give direct access. All right, you can try that out as well. We'll try it at the end. So let's do this. So I'm writing a constructor because of course I want to set the first name and the last name. If nothing was to be set, even in the parent one, even child one, I could have skipped this entirely, but I want to set first name and last name of parent, right? So I take in from the user, okay, this is what user inputs, and I pass it to my parent. So this is with super keyword, I pass it to my parent, and my this is basically this super method is basically calling the constructor, right? Whatever you're passing here is being passed here, right? So, and internally an object of this is being created by passing first name and last name, and whenever you call this particular object of patient, it has access to this object as well, right? So by passing first name last name to pass to the parent will set it on its own object, and I'm setting the disease, which is the third parameter of this class, this while creating this object, and I'm setting it to this disease, right? This disease that this particular class has created a variable of. and the parent doesn't have access to this. Only this is specifically for this particular class, right? So it is setting disease to this dot disease. This is used to access this particular object. Super is used to access. Super with parenthesis is calling the constructor, but super without parenthesis, say super dot get first name, super dot get last name, is basically super is referring to the parent object. Okay, not the parent class, but the parent object, the object that is created for this particular instance of patient. Are you getting that? So let's look into get full name, right? So for patient, I want to call create a method which is get full name. It's a public method, so anybody can access the object using the object. But to construct this particular method is using super dot get first name, right? Again, I'm not using parentheses here because it's a getter function. Okay, it will get me back something without the parenthesis. And super dot last name, right? Super dot first name, super dot last name would not work because it is a private variable, but super dot get first name and get last name are public, so I'll have a super dot. This will definitely work. I've added a space in between and it returns the full name. Okay, let's look at this another method, get disease. This one gets this particular disease. Here I'm not using super because this disease is declared here itself, right? So I'm using this keyword instead of super keyword. For parent I'll use super. For current same class object I'll use this, right? Let's go to next, and now I create an instance of patient, right, which extends user. So new patient, I'm passing it first name, last name, and disease. Okay, I've passed in all three things, and it will set in here in this constructor. It will call this constructor, it will set in here, it will give me access to everything. Let's see, it will give me access to get full name, of course, right? It will give me access to get full name. Also it will give me access to patient dot get disease. Here I'll be using parenthesis. So if I make this particular class as a getter, right, so this is all I have to do, get disease. So now I can remove this parenthesis from here, and let's run this. It takes a little bit of time on Ripple because it converts it into JS and then runs it. So yes, this is what we get printed on screen, full name and the disease. Right, couple of things that we are going to look at now is making this protected, right? Protected. Let's make this protected first name. Okay, and instead of calling get first name, I'll directly say first name. Okay, let's see if this one works. So what I've done here is I have made this a protected one, and I'm changing that reference here, super dot first name directly I'm trying to call, but it's giving me undefined. Let's see why. Protected in TypeScript. Does it even exist? You can see here. Protected implies that the method or property is accessible only internally within the class or any class that extends it but not externally. Not externally means uh, the child class can call it, but if you're calling it from the program using the object, you will not be able to, right? So let's see why in our case especially it's not working, right? There must be some way of implementing it, right? So there it is, protected, this the department, EMP code, right? EMP code, let's look at where is EMP code being used. So it's saying that this will give an error, okay? But here in our case, we are not getting an error, but what are we getting? Undefined. We're not getting an error, of course, right? We are getting undefined. And why is that? Because we'll have to check super.firstname, super.lastname. Let's make both of them as protected and see. That wouldn't make much of a difference. It will give me undefined as the full name, but I want to figure out how to use protected, right? I do want to use protected. This .emp code, they're able to use it here, of course. Is there a reference to they are calling name and code, they're passing name and code? Here's the Stack Overflow answer for it. Let's see. This .x is here, okay. X is in the parent class, B extends A, B is the child. Child has a method multiply, which is calling this dot x. X is private, so this will not work, but it is multiplying by this word y. Y is protected. Notice that in class A there is access to both private and protected. But in class B there is only access to y and this dot x. So x, it's saying that x will throw an error, but y will not. But I'm getting y as undefined. That is most likely because there's no error with the way I've implemented protected, but there's an error with the in initializing those variable, right? Initializing those variable. Have I initialized it before calling it? Is the question, right? So let's see how are they calling it here. This dot x. Oh, am I wrong? Calling it wrong. If I call it this dot x first name and this dot last name, let's see how does that work. Most likely this will work. So it will check if it has got first name and last name in this class or object itself. If it doesn't have in this object, it will look for it in the parent object, right? And there it will get, and that's what it is working, right? It is working. Okay. Say I have a private first name, right? String and private last name to take the value of string. So I've got first name here as well, last name here as well, first name here as well, last name here as well. So parent and child both has got first name and last name. So now get a patient full name, and I'll write another function, another method, get user full name. Okay, so let's call both of them and see. Get patient full name, get user full name. Okay, user full name. Okay, and I need to somehow set it. I'll set this dot first name to be first name with a prefix of patient, right? So something like this, and this dot last name is equal to this dot last name would be just last name, right? Let me just do that. Or okay, let me just do that. So I've instantiated all variables in child class as well as parent class, and I've added first name and last name which are there in parent as well as child. First name in parent is normal first name, right? uh, like this one. Okay, and with the child it is prefixed with patient. Okay, let's run and see what do I get. It will most likely get me both the variable, in both the places it will get me the local name, the child, the first name and last name and child. So we're getting a new error. Class based patient property. Let's read the error. Unable to compile, class patient incorrectly extends base class user. Property first name is private in type patient but not in type user. Okay, so this is one of the criteria that it has to be private at both the places, right? So we cannot use this particular first name and last name example to prove, to see how uh, overriding works or how two methods with the same name in parent and child work. So we'll remove this part, right? This dot first name will also not work. Here maybe I'll have to call this dot get first name, get last name, get first name, get last name. So yeah, so now it's working correctly again, right? So now I need to, all right, let's play with get first name, which is there in parent, right? Get first name, we'll just play with it, we'll add it in child as well, right? Okay, so here it just gives me say hello. It gives me just hello. When you call for get first name in the local one, it just gives me hello, just so that the implementation is different. Let's try and run this. So what happens when get first name is called, right? So let's call, instead of these functions, let's call patient dot get first name. I need not use the parenthesis, that's what it is saying me, because that is a getter function, getter method. But I need to close the brackets. And there it goes, right? So I'm getting local hello and Khandelwal, right? So I'm getting low, it's calling this particular one. And for get last name, it's calling the parent one, okay? But what I want is it to call, say this one, right? Say get full patient name, right? That is what I'm calling. So get full patient name in turn calls get the first name, get last name. Let's see what happens here. It will call the local hello, but I want parent hello, right? So get user hello Khandelwal, right? So let's try this. Get user full name, okay? Get patient full name gives me the local one, but with get user full name, I want it to take the first name from parent, which is being set to Vinith, right? So get user full name. So I've instead of this, I've set it to super. Let's run and see if at least in this case it works, because there are two functions, two methods with the same name in parent as well as the child. Perfect. So in case there is two parent and child having two different same methods with different name, you need to use super. Otherwise you could just use this, right? So that's how it works. Say you have another function in parent, right? Say public get. So it works, super dot works great with public variables, great with methods, public methods, basically anything public, right? So say simply I put public uh, greet to be by, right? By, simple as that. Public greet to be by, right? And let's see, instead of uh, will that work, public greet, and this super dot greet, will it work, right? I'm calling a variable using super. I'm saying ignore, I know that it's not there in the child one, just go to the parent and call it. It's not working. So I believe it doesn't work with variables, right? But it works with, say if I put a public greet here as well, and this is hi, that was by, this is hi. Let's run. So in case of just the parent having the variable, super did not work. Even while copying the variable in child, it did not work. I'm still getting undefined, right? So what is the problem? The which only goes on to say that it works only for functions. It works only for methods, right? I'm continuously using functions and methods interchangeably, but that's not the case. These are methods. A class has got methods. All the objects have access to these methods. Methods do not have the variable, the keyword function in front of it. It is just directly there with the name, right? No need to put just the parenthesis is enough for it to conclude that it's a class method, right? So while functions are not part of the class, they stand individually. They come with a variable. They come with a prefix of a keyword called function, or in modern uh, arrow function, right? In arrow function, it will be just this particular thing, and this particular thing is enough to say that it's a function, right? So that's what it is. So we learned quite a bit about inheritance, and we learned about getter and setter. We did. We learned about function versus method. We just did. Private versus protected. We just did. Super. We definitely did. Abstract object. We did not touch upon this topic. Okay. So this is what is inheritance, right? So what is an interface and uh, abstract object? So interfaces are something like, yeah, it comes with a prefix of this keyword. The convention is to write I user, and it has just variable names, right? It has just got first name and what will the type it will be of and all those things, but it doesn't have any definition. It will have methods, method names, get data or get, right? But it will not have any of those definitions, right? That is what is an interface. It is just a a bare minimum structure which defines that this is all you need to define when you create an object, when you create a class implementing this interface. You must, it forces you to follow this pattern. You need to define these methods, you need to define these variables, right? It's just that it's an enforcement that do all this, and you're good to go, right? Abstract object, on the other hand, abstract class, on the other hand, it's not an object, it's a class. Abstract class, on the other hand, allows you to partially, for some of the for some of the methods, it allows you, not necessarily, but it allows you to define them, and for some you can leave it to the class that will extend it, right? Abstract class is also again extended, interface is inherited, right? And I think there is another rule when it comes to abstract class and uh, inherit interface in TypeScript. That is, one allows you to have multiple uh, inheritance, while, like, look, interface allows you multiple interfaces to be implemented. No, that's a question. Let's look here. This is not quite. Base employee. Base employee is an abstract class, right? And this one allows you, employee is extending it. Okay, so this is an implementation of abstract class, how you extend it. Well, this is an implementation of interface. So there are two interfaces, and this is implementing multiple interfaces. So abstract class doesn't allow you to implement multiple parent classes, but interfaces do, right? You can implement both at the same time. It will tell you to implement all the methods mentioned in both the interfaces or variables in the interfaces, right? So that is one other difference. So that's another check That abstract class is done, interface is done, inheritance is something we started off with. So that's all for this one. Let's look other parts of OOP in the next lecture. This was inheritance. In the next we'll look at polymorphism. There is abstraction. There is there's quite a bit, right? Pi, abstraction, polymorph, pi, abstraction, polymorphism, inheritance, and encapsulation, right? So we'll also look at encapsulation, polymorphism, inheritance we have already looked into, and then we'll look at abstraction too, right? See you in the next one.